Good evening and welcome to the January 31st, 2022 meeting of the Penfield Comprehensive Plan Committee. We have several members in the audience and also several members on Zoom this evening. So running through tonight, I kind of first wanted to start with a little review recap of where we've been, where we've come. We've worked through most of the content of the comp plan. So I think we did the background initially, then we've worked through the newer sections, the future land use. I'll run through some of those, and then tonight, Doug and Carrie kind of want to walk through where you guys see and what their vision is for the layout of the document, how it's going to start to come together, review some of that stuff, and then we're hopeful, given we've gotten all the content portion done, we can then work on the final compilation and then get something back to this group to bless and then pass on to the town board. But to kind of recap that, I went back to our records and where we started and where we've come from. But as I look back, our first meeting was September 11th, 2018. So started with a bigger group. Kudos to those that have stuck it out with us through all this. But we started way back then, did a welcome meeting. We had meetings through the end of 2019. We did several education sessions, kind of went through and explained zoning and explained land use and went through a lot of those sections, got into Town Law 278, went through all those sections. Then into March of 2019, we started out having guests. We had some farmers come out. We had Dave Woodward, Evan Shute, and then we also had Bill Wickham come out, talk to the group. Again, March of 19, we had Matt Ingalls in, talk about some planning, some new things in the planning with that. April of 19, we talked with EMS. So we had Daniel Berger was part of that, as well as the Penfield ambulance group. May, we started talking about some rezonings. So then May of 19, we actually did our first van tour, went out, toured around, looked at some of the sites, some of the initial rezonings with that. And then as we got into later parts of 19, we started talking about what we call the first half of the documents. We talked about community character, the existing natural resources, the transportation system, existing land uses. And then that was in leading up to setting up for our public information meeting. So we held our public information meeting late 2019. We had discussions after that, got input from the public at that kind of 50% draft, took their comments, and then, completed a 50% draft in the beginning of 2020. Our last meeting of 2020, we had the Odenbachs in to talk about Shadow Lake and some of the stuff that they're dealing with on their property, and then the small little thing called COVID happened right after February 25th of 2020, so that took out the rest of 2020 and half of 2021. So then in June of 2021, we reconvened, started talking about, got back into it, started going through some sections. We've got government in civic engagement. We've talked about economic development, business development, agricultural viability, future land uses, and transportation systems. So that's taken us through 2021 as the new sections, the future, looking into land use, looking into where we're looking at the vision of the community moving forward. So as we've worked through most of those sections, and I know they're not 100% complete, we owe you some tweaks to those. We believe, and we've got I think one item to talk a little bit about tonight, but we think we've gotten through most of the content of the document. So now we're kind of looking to how do we put it together. What form does that take? We can talk about, layout and style, but kind of wanted to rehash where we've been and how much time. So this is actually our 27th meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Committee. So it's been a long road, and again, many thanks to this group and for all those who've kind of stuck with us through that time to show that we've, gone through all of it, discussed it, debated it all, to put forth the best for Penfield and going forth into the future. I don't know, Doug, if you got anything to share, Ed. I know Doug, came in, halfway through. He was running Conservation Board as well as the comp plan, and then jumped in and done a good job of taking that over. And then now we've got Carrie Ivers with us. Catherine is a junior planner, but Carrie's coming at it as a Penfield resident, but also a third party eye on the document, and we're looking to her to go through, edit it, pull it together. She's got a lot of comprehensive plan experience, so she's done others. Not looking to change the content that this committee's done, but looking to package it all up and polish it and get it to a nice document and layout. So.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So after our last meeting, we've mostly been making minor tweaks to the document. One of the challenges I was trying to work towards, and unfortunately I wish I could be there in person tonight, was taking all those individual sections that we had been going through at the previous meetings and merging that back into a single document. Dave or Brian, can I share my screen at all? Okay, no worries. There's not much I wanted to show. I just wanted to run through the document really quickly, sort of how we have it. So we've been working to take all those individual sections, like Mark was talking about there, and merge them into a single document. I wanted to run through them, relatively quickly, so we can, if there are other strategies or implementation items, or if there were any, comments or things that you'd written down from previous committee meetings that we either haven't addressed or haven't fully addressed that you'd like to get into the document as we start working through a lot of the formatting, so we can get that sort of packaged up into a singular document. We'll work on how we organize it. We'd like the committee to have some input on that. I've been reviewing, we've been reviewing what some other communities have done recently with their recent comprehensive plan updates or master plan updates to see how they logically organized their information. So we want to at least pose a couple of ideas, see what the committee thinks before we really start incorporating it into the document. You guys are, oh, that's weird. So we want to get a couple of ideas out to you guys. So to start off, I wanted to pose this question, is there anything or any topic that either we haven't discussed fully or that you guys had, whether written comments or just thoughts that we hadn't incorporated into the document yet that you would like to discuss? So I do want to pose that to you guys before we move too much further.
Yes, I would like to go back to something that I had raised really early on, and you mentioned in passing, Doug. But as copious a note taker as I am, all I have is my own notes to myself on this, and written in double capital letters, Civic Engagement, that I don't feel like we really dove into that or talked about what that meant, what sort of strategies, proposals, goals, and so forth we could have. There were little aspects of things tucked into places like sustainability, but my feeling was that as a comprehensive plan for a town whose nickname is the Town of Planned Progress, and especially given everything that's been going on in the world, civic engagement is something to be, kind of grabbed by both lapels and not just sort of embedded lightly like an undershirt,
Okay.
Doug, can I jump in there? First of all, I love your comment. I think that as the third party sort of outsider, and let me introduce myself if that's okay. So I'm Carrie Ivers. I'm the new Jim Costello. And I say new, I'm the different Jim Costello. I'm the Developmental Services Director. My background is, prior to being here, I was the Director of Community Development for the town of Arundequoit for 7.5 years. And prior to that, I was a private sector consultant in a planner, a community planner. So I've done comprehensive plans all over New York State and beyond. And so I'm super excited to be coming in. Actually, at this stage, you've done really great work identifying major issues, concerns, targeting future goals and priorities. And so I get to come in at my favorite part, which is sort of assembling the document and organizing it. When I think about civic engagement now, in light of in the aftermath, or maybe still riding the wave of the pandemic, there are new ways to be civically engaged. In addition to in-person meetings, we've also very quickly had to learn how to incorporate technology into that. And I think that creates some really great opportunities for the future as how we, can we bring town hall to other locations, to our schools, to area universities, to engage with those populations, to other, there are many organizations at the local and regional level that specialize in a variety of topics that the town is very interested and concerned about. So how do we capitalize on those opportunities to reach out to our university partners, to reach out to nonprofit organizations that might have a focus or a specialty on something that the town wants to navigate or develop new policies around. So I think our civic engagement section is probably going to target those types of opportunities with some specificity, but also keeping it open-ended so that as new opportunities emerge, the comprehensive plan's still current and relevant. And it gives a general guide of the priority is to be a transparent government that invites conversation with lots of ideas and lots of people with different ideas so that we can come to some better solution for certain things as we have to address community issues. I think that section can definitely be strengthened.
And what I would like to see with it also is some sort of, I know we are not like laying out specific tactics that should be followed on a year-to-year basis or something, but I would like to see metrics attached to that, because as this committee is perfect evidence of, we started as a very large committee, and it's down to a handful of us who fairly routinely show up, that we don't really want that sort of 80-20 rule where 20% of the people are doing 80% of the committee work or on 80% of anything. I mean, and we've all been in organizations, from civic organizations to churches to Boy Scout troops or whatever, where, the same group of people does everything. What I would like to see is some sort of metric that can capture the sort of unique individual engagements with individuals throughout the community. So that we, just like you look at individual views, you're looking at website development. You want to find out how many unique views you've got.
Sure.
Not some one person who's obsessed with something and looks at it 5,000 times. So
Right.
I would like to see us apply some sort of a metric to it so that we'll be able to tell, are we reaching out to a larger assortment of people, or is it just the same people over and over again who are maybe a little more revved up than they were in the first place?
I think and I think we can flesh that out a little bit as staff can work on some potential metrics. It could be the number of different community sessions or conversations that are conducted during the course of a year across a variety of topics. That's already happening in some cases. It could be monitoring or tracking views or attendance on Facebook, on the live, on PCTV. It could be a lot of different things that we look at to see how engaged or number of emails received, and I don't know if it's, I wonder how, it might be a little bit challenging to put some target to some of those, but I think even identifying the need to track them could be beneficial, so that we're not necessarily saying we have to have 20 emails a week in order to feel like we've had transparent government. sometimes the no news or no emails is actually a good sign. It means people are pretty happy with how things are going, generally speaking. And think about your own experience, I don't know, going to a restaurant. We generally only speak up when something's not right. We don't rush to tell the manager how fantastic our meal and our server was. We walk out and tell our friends that, but we don't tell anybody there. I think sometimes that same tactic or that same sort of model applies to any organization, as people only speak up when they're concerned about something. So sometimes quiet means all is good.
But the point is that our town can be better if it's not quiet. If there is activity in a positive way.
Sure.
With things, a few of us have mentioned in the past some of the things we did. We used to have a Penfield, what was it called, Country Home Days? What was the?
Country Fair Days. Country Fair Days.
Country Fair Days. That was a great form of positive engagement for people in the town.
Sure.
And there were other sorts of things. You know, there is the Terry Rothfuss Good Neighbor Day, for example. There's forms of positive engagement. So I don't want to sort of go with the model where no news is good news.
True.
I'd like to have lots of news and most all of it be good.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. I wondered too if and this is something maybe to talk about, there's certainly SurveyMonkey has made community outreach pretty easy to accommodate or to achieve. And so it could be a periodic surveying of the community. It's pretty easily accessible. You can set it up in the library so that anybody who doesn't have a computer has access to it. Might be something worth looking at, so that if there's pressing questions or just people wanting to check in on issues or things that people are interested in, that might be an easy way to engage with the community as well.
Great.
So-
Thanks, Carrie.
I actually want to build on that because, I actually want to build on that. The demographics is that other piece of that, which is the technology allows us to be able to a much broader way interconnect with younger members of the community that maybe historically haven't stepped up or haven't really voiced. So your recommendation, I don't know if we necessarily have to pinpoint the exact technology, but I think leveraging technology to expand the demographics of the people that we're reaching and we're getting input and feedback from. Because, as a rule, I've now been doing this several years, and what I've learned is, and I don't mean this necessarily negative to anybody here, but we are, for the most part, a tad longer in the tooth than a good portion of the resources that are out there. And so I would like to see that civic engagement include the younger generations and how we can get them engaged.
So I think there's also some opportunity here. I cannot believe my children are going to be mortified that I'm going to say this, and maybe Marie as well, but could the town of Penfield find itself having a TikTok? Does that make sense? That's a place if you want to reach and I count myself in that. I'm slightly addicted. My poor children showed me the TikTok app, and now they're very sorry because all I do is send them funny TikToks about babies and dogs. But those kinds of things, to what extent should the town be involved in certain social media? Is that a way to go meet people where they are, or at least entertain them in some way periodically?
Yeah, but
maybe not. But I think those are worth having conversations. The town of Penfield is fortunate that there's a new communications specialist on staff that I think is potentially going to bring some new ideas or new strategies to the town, which will be wonderful. So I think we leave everything on the table. The nice thing about a comprehensive plan is it allows you to set a general sense of direction and identify target goals or things that you want to achieve. But if you do it well, a really good comprehensive plan is broad enough to account for things that we are not thinking about right now. So that it's some general sense, and then based on that overall framework, if some new issue pops up, you have an idea of what the direction should be based on what's in the comprehensive plan. When the comprehensive plan is so prescribed that doesn't leave any room for, okay, we said if A or B, but then J happens, well, then what? So that's really the idea, is you want to have some specificity, And then you also want to have some general or broader framework that gives you, and I say you, the collective community, more importantly, though, the town board and the planning board and the zoning board, some guidance of where to go or how to proceed. And I'll stop talking. I'm sorry, you're going to notice this about me. A microphone is a dangerous tool in front of my mouth. I apologize. Doug, I stole it for a second. Please take it back from me.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I appreciate all the input. So those are two things. I've got the draft document open, over here on my screen, and you can't see it quite there on the side. I've been adding comments, trying to incorporate some of what you said, and I'll be working with Carrie and our other staff to incorporate, both of those points, leveraging technology to promote engagement with younger demographic within the town of Penfield, as well as identifying metrics to track resident engagement with the town, as two items that we can implement within our strategies for encouraging civic engagement within the community. So I'll work on incorporating those into the greater document for you guys. As long as we're here, do you want to go over sort of our civic engagement policy statement? It's sort of the way the document is organized, or the way the last half is organized, is that we sort of have a brief introduction to the topic, followed by a policy statement, which is a very broad and sort of general sense of the big goal, the 30,000-foot view. Below that is some strategies to implement that policy, ways we can work to encourage that larger goal, and below that is some implementation items that we have, which are ways to take a look at the strategies and sort of broadly how we could work to implement those strategies in furtherance of the goals of the document. So the policy statement we have is to provide a positive atmosphere in which open communication and collective action are supported. Over the next decade and a half, the town will work together with residents, businesses, and organizations to make our community a model for effective delivery of governmental services and cooperative decision-making in our region. So we do have the 5 strategies that we previously outlined. We'll work on getting those other 2, leveraging technology and identifying metrics to track engagement into the strategies. And I'll have that finished for our next meeting when we work on getting you guys the full document. So thank you, Donna, for that. That was very, very helpful. Are there any other areas that the committee has comments or concerns? I can move forward through a few more of them.
What I was going to, that's a whole new topic.
Oh.
But there's one other topic in the category of new topic, and I'm not sure where we would land this. It's probably going to land in the future land use section of the plan. Yeah. Is obviously New York State has legalized marijuana. Dispensaries are going to be permitted use. New York State is going to have a licensing sort of a policy or regulations around its licensing decisions. In other words, when applicants come forward, there are going to be a series of thresholds that they have to meet New York State requirements. My understanding, they're not available or prepared, they're not out in the public yet. My understanding is that there's going to be some type of a land use control in the state's regulations about where they're going to license folks that is going to create a minimum distance for, just schools and churches, daycares, and the such. We haven't seen those yet to know what those look like. So it's probably premature to put really hard and fast rules together, because we don't want to say anything that could fly in the face of New York State. New York State, we can be more restrictive, we can't be less, so we want to be careful about saying anything. I think that we should have something in there, though, that would allow the town board to move forward with a future zoning modification should they decide that additional local controls are warranted. So I think,
Something on
Talk
the,
about this stuff?
I thought we did talk about.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this.
did you? Okay, I apologize. I didn't.
No, that's all right.
And maybe it just didn't get captured directly in the content of the, or I didn't get to that section yet. That's a very good chance.
I think we may have captured it in the agriculture section where we were talking about greenhouses, industrial-type greenhouses, and what is permissible,
So
what's
that's
not
on the
permissible.
production side.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think we talked
Yes.
about it in that context.
Okay.
I think what you're talking about is saying foundationally, we're recommending that after an extensive review of the New York State policies, that the town revisit that to determine if any additional zoning would be appropriate for the town of Penfield, and then bringing that to light.
Yeah, and I think even in the general terms, I'm so glad we're recording this meeting because we can take your words almost verbatim and put them in writing, but something to that effect, some general framework that says we're going to review the state's regulations and to the extent needed or desired at the time to, promote Penfield's health, wealth, safety, all those good things, we might need to revisit the zoning to enact local control.
Yeah, and we talked about on the growing end through the agricultural part of it. Carrie's kind of relating to the dispensary end of it, and I don't know as we got as much into, now that they're legalizing, where can you sell it? Where, is there dispensary locations? The town moved ahead saying that, we don't want to lose out on the tax dollars, but what districts does it make sense in? What would the parameters be around, where can you sell it within the community? So we kind of came at it on the agricultural end of it, of the growing it. How does it impact the agricultural piece of it?
Yeah, but like you stated, without having the New York State regulations available, anything we put down, any recommendation we put could be somehow prohibited because we're impacting the bare minimum, so.
And the whole, sort of the dispensary end of it wasn't, the discussion wasn't as far along in New York State the last time we
Yeah,
took up that discussion here.
Yeah, that's the part we just wanted to bring back up, just to-
It's been an evolutionary,
Yeah, I think-
process.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is any local law that the town wanted to enact for a future zoning update, if that were to be determined to be needed, would be subject to public hearings on their own. So it's not like if we don't talk about it now, we can never talk about it. But I always want to make sure that a comprehensive plan includes some reference to any item that might be a future zoning update, because the comprehensive plan is the legal basis for zoning code modifications by New York State law. So you really want to have it referred to in some general terms. Really general is okay. And it just sort of, and then it gives the town board something to point to say, well, the comprehensive plan included that we had this ability to, modify our local codes if that was warranted.
So where is this now in the plan?
I think it probably makes sense to put it with the future land use.
Is it anywhere?
It is not as of yet.
It's not anywhere right now.
That's why we were bringing up about the dispensaries, because this
I thought it
is.
was, I missed something.
So this is a relatively new item for discussion. I mean, it was just recently passed, through the pandemic. The opt-in or opt-out period for marijuana dispensary sales and on-site consumption is something that, and I believe the deadline really just passed here in terms of opt-in within the last month or two. So it's something that we had previously discussed on the sort of the sales side, where the town has opted in. We had previously focused a lot of our conversation on the potential for the production within the agricultural districts, and what we would want to see within the agricultural areas of town and agricultural viability. And part of the conversation was on at that time nothing had passed, but it was very much the conversation was moving towards growing operations. So now that we're looking at sales. Like Carrie said, the state and through the Office of Cannabis Management has not released any guidelines. It's once they are out, there is a sort of tricky line that we have to follow where we can't be less restrictive, but we can't be so much more restrictive that it's prohibitive.
Right.
But just having something within the document that captures the committee, your feelings on, not prescribing it down to like actual specific areas or any specific regulations, but just saying, your thoughts like, our commercial districts, is there commercial districts that, could have the potential for being an area where those kinds of sales happen, but not specifically coming down to, it can't be greater than 500 feet and you have to have this, that, and the other, to be able to open, but just having a general sense of, the community's supportive of them within commercial districts, meeting whatever regulations put forth by the state, or that the committee is supportive of the town board taking a look at local land use changes or zoning changes once the state has released their rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. Something general like that.
Yeah.
That's about all you can do.
Right.
Yeah, and I think and Doug, it probably would be valuable to stress that it should be a sort of a collaborative look by the town board, because there are the districts that they essentially kind of control, the zoning board, and maybe developmental services or something like that. It should be sort of a collaborative decision. Mm-hmm.
I think there's also some,
as to what would work, what areas physically might work best in the towns for a whole variety of different reasons.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think also there's an opportunity for the town to interact with other communities that have also opted in. So to see sort of where other towns, not that has to dictate, but if there's some common, thread of, well, we're consistent with our,
only, or,
if there's other communities that are sort of, putting in zoning controls, then it's difficult for any one provider or the state or anyone else to say, well, Penfield's being extra restrictive. Well, actually, no, there's 7 other communities that are doing the same thing. So there's learning from other communities and also seeing what other, how they're approaching it can be helpful in learning maybe what might or might not work for Penfield.
Well, I think to that point, Carrie, looking to communities outside of New York State, like Colorado and California, where these have been in place for a long time, to see what the lessons learned have been about what types of placements make sense, what seemed like a great idea at first and then just blew up in people's faces. So I think not to restrict ourselves just to looking at our neighbors who are equally
newbies,
sort of new in the process, but to communities that have enough in common with our community that we feel like we're sort of on the same level, but that have a lot more experience.
Yeah,
so
Massachusetts, like a best
Massachusetts
practice review really is, yeah.
Best practice review.
Yeah, I think there are other communities. We are trying to educate ourselves. Doug and I have been, I've actually had conversations in my prior work with somebody who was interested just to learn the other side of things. And I was really shocked to learn the amount of investment that is required to become a licensed dispensary. There are going to be, if New York State follows suit to other states, the stipulations for even the structure, the design, use of glass, it's like a high-end jewelry store meets a liquor. I mean, it's just the amount of investment that goes into being able to legally operate it's not a fly-by-night type of an operation, for sure.
So we won't see them popping up like the CBT or CBD ones that were.
Well, I think the message we've been sharing with any CBD stores is that just because you have CBD does not mean that your location will be a permitted site for any future dispensary. That's an absolute true statement. You've invested in a CBD company or location, it may not work as a dispensary site location because either the state's regulations for location and licensing, or because the town has enacted additional controls to locate that business in districts that it feels makes the most sense. So I think that's important for people to be aware of, that every CDB shop is not going to be viable as a dispensary location. And you're right, it's very new, but I think learning from other states can be very valuable.
Yes, doing a best practice review could be something that we add into the future land use section. I
think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And that's a short-term action item that the town can undertake while we await the state's regulations. There's no reason why we can't be learning from other communities that have had a lot of experience with it for, years or, years and months.
Anybody else have any other content stuff that we're missing before we kind of start talking about how do we pull this all together? While you're thinking, I know Catherine has reached out. PCTV has been providing us some photos. They've done some drone pictures, footage, parks, town hall, so we're hopeful to use some of that stuff. She's also reached out to the recreation department, so hopefully we can get some recent photos of community activities, kid engagements, families, that type of stuff for the document. So I know we've reached out to them, and as well as our communication specialist, prior Phyllis Ely, and then Chris Tenay is our new communication specialist, of what photos and documents and stuff that they have. Catherine's been working hard on all the maps. So I know we're looking at, within the document, we may have some less detailed imagery of a sanitary sewer network, and then hopefully in the digital document, here's one of the photos that they took, the drone picture at night of the town hall. Might make a nice photo, within the document somewhere. So we're starting to pull some of that
I think
stuff
that's
in.
a cover photo.
And then
It would be a good shot.
we'll start to compile some of those stuff and then, bring that back to the group. But then, as Doug had shared in the past, we've had embedded in the document some maps. While they're in the document, it's great. They're pretty much illegible at some points. So we may look at the appendices to have fold-out ones. So if you get a hard copy, it can be a bigger fold-out. Or obviously, if you download the digital version, we'll make it a high-resolution PDF so that actually you can pull up a sewer network map and see more detail and stuff with that. So we're looking at having some simplified versions in the document, and then either appendices, larger, versions, so you actually can read and learn from those.
What about,
Mark, on that, I'm sorry, on that same line, would it be possible, or Doug, maybe ask you, to just hyperlink some of the maps and things like that, as, because sometimes, like, I'm looking through this comprehensive plan, I'm saying, okay, now where's the map that goes with that section? Wait a minute, hold on, and I'm looking at
So the
multiple pages.
PDF
Can we just hyperlink some of
electronic
this
version.
stuff
Yeah,
in there?
Absolutely.
That'll be the plan with the digital copy, especially the one that will ultimately get uploaded to the website for the public's view. Is having hyperlinks within the document to jump, so the table of contents will be linked so that you could click on a section, jump to that section, but you could also click on maps, take you to the maps. If you wanted to click on the plans, it would take you to the plans because all the plans that we listed in the beginning under previous plans and studies are all on the town website. So we'll have them hyperlinked within the document so that if somebody's reading through that and they go, oh, I want to know more about the Bay Creek Browncroft plan, they can click on that and it would take them to that as well.
Great, thank you.
So,
Sorry, Roland, you had a comment?
I know this was mentioned once long ago, but what about the concept of a town center? Is there anything that's been brought forth into the document?
I mean, the document,
sorry.
talking about a town center.
Town center.
So I know, that's kind of been a debate, within talking about mixed use in the last development. I think there is a lot of potential for the mixed use area to be a new growth, but we've also not want to take away from the Four Corners, which is kind of the, original village area.
Do you mean like a
that's not
community
what
center?
That's not
Oh,
what I
community
was
center.
referring to. As there was discussion, if the committee remembers, because the library, the community center is rather detached away from the main campus here. and bringing everything together more in a central location. Many towns are now developing that concept as well.
Thanks for clarifying. I think we've left the document kind of generalized. I don't think we've set a location, but I think as we talked about town infrastructure, town facilities, look at the needs of DPW and either new build, future construction, look at community center, continued growth. So we haven't identified, I don't think, to say that this is the official campus, but within the document, we definitely said that the town continues to grow and expand, and the community center, library, courts are kind of at their limit right now, and we need to, investigate opportunities of whether really I'd say addition, expansion, but in the current format or current setup, there's really not room to do that on that campus. So I don't think we've specifically identified whether this is the official campus or not, but I think through the document, we try to identify that we need to, in future boards, town boards need to look at continued growth of the town, meeting the community's needs through a community center, senior center, and then whether that means if that leaves and then the library can expand. We didn't get that detail, but we do have references in the document under town facilities to.
Mark, does it
do that.
recommend a facilities study at some point, like as an actual action
That's one
item?
of the things that I know current town board is looking at now. We've done an assessment of the DPW facility. We're doing some, assessments of, I believe, ongoing of the community center and what the needs are. So we're kind of in that needs assessment range now, and then we'll have to look at, where does it make sense if we're going to build new, where, how big, how much.
So, in other words, to continue to explore those,
Yep.
any possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's especially at a comprehensive plan level, it's good to identify the need that, the current facilities may or may not be able to meet the growing needs of the community. And then maybe identify some potential, thresholds or targets that might need to be met and as for decision-making purposes, so that it helps you decide what site might be better than another based on, some common, if it's, centrally located, is it accessible by multiple, modes of transportation? Is it, does it have enough space to, to meet growing, to either expand or to be bigger than what we have now? If so, maybe some additional study is needed to determine like what size of a thing is needed, depending on what it is, whether it's community center space, recreation space, library.
And that's basically what should be said in the document.
Yes.
That the town will be open to such studies
Yes.
in the future.
Yeah. I think that's how we've left it thus far, and we can share that.
Setting the thresholds, that's, to me, just interesting, because if we take a look at we'll go back to the demographics question, the town, the Penfield, like other towns in the local area, is aging a little bit. And so the needs of the town need to be able to adjust to the demographics of the town as well.
That's true.
So not only do we want to have a connectivity or the process to bring people who are younger into the town, we also need to be realistic about the demographics of who's living here, and do our community centers meet those needs?
No, that's really an important point. Just in general, as a society and as in a town, and we're an aging population. Our baby boomers the fastest growing, maybe the fastest growing demographic across the board.
Yeah, it's the
Right.
fastest growing demographic in Penfield right now. It's the 65 plus, followed by 55 to 64.
Yeah, so that tells us that, that's a really telling thing, so that for the next, at least for the next 25 years, we need to be mindful of that target group as well. And I think also there's a growing tradition that, sort of, if you plan, there's some like 8 to 98, right? So if you plan well for young people and old people, everybody in between is well served. And so I think that's the other thing that the plan could point to, is making sure that future facility decisions are meeting both ends of the spectrum, because then the whole community's needs are being realized.
I think that this brings up 2 points, though. One is that the demographics have to be looked at in a nuanced way. Because if you just look at the average age, what has substantially brought up the average age is the large number of elder care facilities in this town. Okay, so Baywind, Elderwood, you have a lot of places like that that have come into this particular community and not housing for younger people. So it's a numerically correct thing to say, you know, the average age is X, but the fact that a lot of that population is housed independently in places that doesn't utilize a lot of the same services that those people would if they were living on their own. So I think the demographics have to be looked at in a refined way to really understand the types of services, the levels of services, and not kind of skew them just based on raw numbers. Secondly, I think that to a point that George raised earlier about how technology influences things, we don't use libraries the same way as we used to. We don't use a variety of other places the same ways as we used to in terms of how we use the space and what the infrastructure has to look like. So a threshold of, you know, we have X number of bodies in our town, so we need Y number of square feet of recreation space, that doesn't necessarily translate either. And we don't have a crystal ball. We don't exactly know what the technology improvements are going to be. But I think we have to keep an open mind to that. And we can't prescribe that in the comprehensive plan, but I do think it needs to be noted that those types of refinements and nuances are really critical in analyzing the data before making decisions about project planning.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think the other thing is realizing that there's a science behind community center design, recreation facility analysis in terms of what's needed, what would work, what doesn't work, and also that's informed by every community is a little bit different about what they need or want. I'm wondering if we think about whether or not at some point in the future, and maybe Mark and Doug and Catherine and Mike are going to want to take me out back and shoot me when this meeting is done, but at some point in the future, could a senior services study be something that we engage in? In other words, whether it's lifetime, is it like, hang on one second, I'm going to name the wrong organization. I will think of it in a moment, but Lord in heaven, they're on Clinton Avenue near McQuaid. It's not Lifetime. I will think of it in a moment, but there's an organization that's geared toward helping seniors, and I know you all know what I'm talking about. Lifespan, thank you. But they're an expert in this field and have done community studies with other organizations. Is that something that the town might want to engage in or take the task on themselves, either through recreation or the library, just to understand what the seniors need and want? And then that you get a little bit of that nuance of where are they now? Are they living in their own? The surveys can be designed so that you're getting to the detail of, are they living in their own home? Are they renting somewhere? Are they in a, where are they living now? And that helps to decide what kind of services and what percentage of the population needs what things. So I think it might be something worth looking at in the future, not necessarily an action, not something that's happening as part of the comprehensive plan, but something that you do as a future action item. And maybe not that prescribed, but just additional study or analysis of what senior needs might be. And then it goes back to the civic engagement question that you raised of even just reaching out to the various organizations that serve our seniors. What are they seeing? They might have a lot of insight.
Anything else? Those are all good.
Yeah, those are really good.
Good discussion topics. Carrie, do you want to run through? You had some thoughts, ideas on organization or document?
Well, I had more questions. So one of the things, so Doug, as he mentioned earlier, is going to be sort of consolidating everything into one document. And he and I are going to work together sort of how to best organize it so that it's easy to access and read, and it sort of flows pretty logically. There are a couple of questions I had. how does this group feel about an executive summary of the document, like a 3 to 5 page, here's a snapshot view of what the comprehensive plan outlines, contains, what it's for? You know, so like if no one's going to read the 90-page document, or if somebody doesn't want to read the 90-page document, is there a short executive summary that sort of gives them the elevator speech version of the comp plan?
Well,
Kinda
the
like a
previous
fact
one
sheet.
has had an executive summary.
Okay,
So yeah.
okay.
I think you were talking, I mean, some have them as an external separate document, or others incorporated in it. So I think incorporating it within the document, I think, makes sense. Others kind of have standalone documents. with
Plan
an
light, yeah.
A comp plan light thing, which where we've done in the past is keep it within it, and I think we're just confirming that's
Well,
similar layout.
if it will mostly be used digitally, then what's the harm of just keeping it in it? Because people can just read that and skip the rest,
That's
you know?
kind of our thought, but
That's
we
what-
just,
that
we
was
just
our
wanted to
thought.
confirm.
We wanted to make sure we're
Yeah.
not,
We're on the same page and going forward.
I agree.
okay. All right, it's a format that works well. We just want to make sure there are other options out there, so we want to make sure before we proceed with how it's been done before, that there wasn't a strong preference that, oh, we hated that in the past. But no, okay. The other concept or thought that I shared with Doug is, you know, early on in the document, we go through sort of that existing conditions, and it's a lot. So there are some plans that create sort of a summary, a very brief, you know, here's an overview of the demographics of the community. For more information and charts and all the great detail, please see Appendix A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, whatever the case may be, so that you get to the meat of the recommendations faster in the document and don't lose people in pie charts and other, you know, other sort of statistical analyses.
Yeah, we call that death by PowerPoint in my occupation.
So I wanted to gauge your thoughts about maybe following that model where all the, you know, the charts, we can have some really good summary narrative, maybe a few graphics that help to, you know, make the most important points about what we're seeing from an existing condition standpoint, but put a lot of the technical detail in an appendices.
Agreed. Go ahead.
Here's a question.
I'm good with that, yeah.
Who's our audience? Who do we think is going to read the entire comp plan? So I mean, and I'm not saying this to be facetious, but, you know, you want to target it to your reader. So who do we think will read the comp plan? Because if we think that most residents, if they attack it at all, are going to spend maybe an hour doing it, then what it suggests is that we should do that same type of thing consistently throughout the document, that we shouldn't have more than maybe 40 pages worth
Donna?
of stuff.
Didn't mean to interrupt, but don't forget, it's also a tool for future town boards as well.
So you got to.
Oh, yeah, no, but what I mean is
And
just
that's-
including more in the appendix section and less in the narrative section.
But I mean, that's the whole purpose, is it's also a tool for many future town boards as well. That's why.
But I appreciate what you're saying. I think there's a balance there, and I think if you're comfortable with the idea that some of the more detailed or technical elements could land in an appendices, we can be really thoughtful and strategic about making sure that we get to the point. And the comprehensive plan is really supposed to be a look forward at where you want to go and what you envision in a framework for future policy and decision-making. So the faster you can get to that point, I think, the better. However, you have to also balance that with, we're not planning in a bubble. We have a whole history of time in the town that's important and provides a context. So I think it's a matter of finding a balance between those two. But if this board's open to it, I think we can come to you with a draft that maybe balances those two things, where we're giving enough context in advance of getting to the point of, well, here are the recommendations of this plan, if that makes sense. And I think I want to say my answer for who the target audience is, for sure, it's the town board members. They'll be reading that document cover to cover. And if it's, and I'll be a gentle reminder, because I'm very passionate about planning. But it's also, I think planning boards, zoning board will also generally take a look at it. Conservation boards are always very interested in the comprehensive plan. And then there will be certain, obviously, I think other residents and folks who are really passionate or interested in these kinds of things, and they'll certainly be readers as well.
I think that's reasonable. Some communities have actually only issued amendments to the plan
Right.
and past plans, and that's it.
Correct, right. And Penfield's been really, really consistent in doing its comprehensive plan. I can tell you at the town where I was prior, that the comprehensive plan that was the first order of business in 2014, that was my first task, was to take the draft that had been worked on but never actually been adopted, retool it and go through the process again with the public so they could bless the update. Prior to that, 1988 had been the last adopted comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
So Penfield's done a remarkable job of being very consistent with its plan updates. And when I say update, I mean they re-engage in the process. So it's very commendable, and there are a lot of towns that have not been as consistent.
Yeah, the other thing that, because primarily an electronic document, Doug, as you guys structure it, the more detailed information can be linked easily as they read through. More details, click, boom, there you are. You don't even have to leaf through to find the appendix. It will carry you.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
It'll seem seamless to somebody that's looking at a particular section. But again, I'm going to go back because Roland brought us back to the focus, which is the primary audience of this thing is the town board. That is
Right.
who it has to be structured to be, first and foremost, to use.
Right.
And the zoning.
Yeah, and so we do want to have that narrative structure with the context, and I want to make sure that the appendixes, that we do and the extra detail that's in them is referenced throughout the document,
Yeah.
specifically and in such ways that it would be easy to find. So if you are in a certain section and we do, the narrative structure gives you enough context to understand, but you really want to know about the numbers behind it. So, traffic systems. We'll go through, a bit about the different road types and how we categorize them, but you don't need to know every road in town and what category it falls in as a major arterial, a rural connector, a local road, or understanding, a lot of the traffic volume data that goes behind how we determine, a lot of times, where are intersections in need, things like that. We can move all that to an appendix where if you really want to look at all the tables and you want to look at a breakdown of the information, you can and dive deeper into it, but within the narrative structure, there's enough context and just enough of that information that you can really understand, okay, this is why, this is where we are, this is what we're looking to do, or this is what we think the future will look like, and this is our recommendation. So you can really understand, based on that narrative structure, but, the appendix will be if you really want to take that deep dive and get into the weeds and understand all the information that went behind, what we wrote in the narrative structure. But, you don't necessarily want to spend 15 pages looking at, endless tables and charts and things like that.
Yeah.
For demographic information, that's another great one.
Right.
Part of the appendix will have a lot of the census data and census information that we've broken down, and a lot of our charts, we have 4 years of census data because it really gives you the opportunity to look between 1990, 2000, 2010, and hopefully now with the 2020 data starting to come out, we have 4 years of information, and you don't necessarily want to look at all those tables and have all of those tables taking up full pages, but being able to get an idea and have all that information in another place that is referenced and is easy to find, but doesn't, you're not reading through a textbook.
Right.
It should make it easier once we get the 2020 census data in. If it's in appendices, you can easier swap in and out than,
Right.
before we've hit it in green within the document. Now you've kind of got new data and old charts, and so it's easier to kind of do that upgrade or swap
Yeah,
that out.
and again, not to speak for everybody, but for me, we've talked section by section, but as I see it as a holistic, that'll be easier for me to provide some feedback once I see it all stitched together, and things that don't make sense, for sure, I'm not shy, I'll raise my hand.
Right.
But we've really, because we broke it up with by section, some of that interconnectivity that you guys are referring to and this smoothness of the transition, we haven't seen it yet. So
Right.
it's going to be hard for me to speak to how well
Yeah.
that's going to work until I see it.
Well, and the other thing, and that's a fair point, I think the other thing is, this is going to be a really great check to make sure that there hasn't been, sort of, we're not by accident contradicting ourselves, like we say something in one section and then we say something a little bit different somewhere else. So when you pull it all together, that's really where you get to make sure that the themes and the message and the goals and priorities are consistent throughout. And if it works out well, it usually means that similar themes carry through all of the categories, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? So you're seeing the commitment to sustainability in every one of the categories, even beyond just sustainability. When you talk about civic engagement, transparency and collaboration are themes that happen in all the other all the other topic areas as well. So there'll
Yeah.
be a lot of overlap, I think, in that. And I think it might be fair that we might add some language at the beginning of the document about that, the fact that you might see some recurring themes and that are just sort of the basis or the foundation of the plan document, based on all of the sort of topic by topic analysis and discussion that this group and the larger community have had. And so I think, Doug, from an organizational standpoint, that we wanted to make sure that that approach was acceptable, right? Was there anything else we wanted
Yes.
from a document assembly? I like, and I'm going to just speak for myself, I like documents to be really readable. So pictures are very helpful. Pictures certainly are worth 1,000 words. We talked about the mapping being used more as a graphic in the document, so that people will be told early on that every map that's shown as a graphic will be also available in the appendices in more detail. But I think it helps to orient folks to where they're looking at and gives them a sense of what the topic is, depending on what section of the plan we're in. I like call-out boxes for key issues, ideas, things that are really important. So if there are topics or issues that you really feel like would be something, if no one reads anything, they usually read what's in the call-out box. So those are the kinds of things that we'll probably do our best to come up with what we think are good call-out boxes. But if there's something, if we're picking something in this community, this whole collective committee thinks, oh, actually, no, let's highlight this thing instead, those are the kind of conversations we can have once the document's been assembled. And we're targeting the end, we're trying to target the end of this month to have that pulled together.
How long will we have to go through it?
We can adjust that time. So
Yeah.
you tell us how long you need to go through it, because obviously it's crucial for you guys to read through it, have time to.
What's a good time? Like, if we gave you a document, whatever day, what's a reasonable amount of time for you to really be able to take a peek at it, look at it, live with it for a minute? Is it a couple of weeks?
2 weeks or?
I mean, how long was the previous one again, over 100 odd pages?
179. I pulled up the PDF just to remind
I have a hard
myself.
copy right here.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully with,
This thick, Roland.
hopefully
Okay.
with appendices and other stuff to the
So,
end.
I mean, I think in all fairness, I'm going to speak for myself. I would do an initial review and I make myself some notes and then I walk away from it.
Okay.
And then I come back and I use the notes to re-reference and then do a second run-through.
Okay.
So I'm going to want at least 2 weeks to speak for myself.
That seems fair.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks is
Sufficient?
perfect
Okay.
for me.
And do me a favor, don't overlap the third week of the month for me, because depending on how many cases I get for the other board, so, just keep in mind, I'd rather have like the first half of
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's fair. I think if we try to target having something pulled together by the end of the month of this month. We would then, if we're able to pull that off, and that's what we're targeting right now, that means we'd be looking at, giving it to you somewhere before March and maybe giving it to the middle of March to get some comments back to us so we can get things finalized. And then at that point, our hope would be to turn around comments, edits, changes. If there's nothing too significant, if there's any life-altering decisions, then we would reconvene this group to hash those out. But if not, then we'd be making those edits and then moving them over to the town board for their sort of preliminary review, and then moving it out to the public from there.
I think, too, what would help would be for all of us when we're at that point to submit our comments in the form of emails to all.
Yes.
So before a meeting, so as not to bog down an entire meeting, but to go into a meeting knowing
Well, that's
to be more efficient rather
that's a
than
great idea. We could also,
going over and over and over and over and over and
Okay.
over things.
well, the other thing too, with that idea, if you had comments that you wanted to provide back to us in writing, that also maybe gives us an opportunity to provide sort of a summary of either a response or how we've managed or handled that comment, so that you see how it gets resolved.
And just streamline the entire process better.
Okay.
Okay.
Doug, is there anything else that you needed? I'm trying to remember. I'm apologizing.
Those were all the major topic items
Yeah.
I had lined up for tonight.
Could any changes from the last plan be accentuated in one form or another for that at that time?
You mean from the original plan or from?
Yeah.
From the 2010 or from our original drafts?
I wonder.
From our original draft, just to see what changes have been made.
So Doug, you did a fairly extensive rewrite after Alex, right? After
Zach.
Zach, after Zach left, we did you took at least 6 or 7 sections, as I recall, and I'm trying to go back to my notes, how many it was, and rewrote. The only reason I think Roland is I think he's so extensively rewritten it would be, all of it would be highlighted.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
most current, I should have said, most current changes.
Oh, so in other words, the ones from the last 2 or 3 meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I'm sorry for the
Yeah.
confusion.
Yeah, I can do that. I've already, to some degree, I don't know if, I think I've still got my screen on share. Brian, do I still have my screen on share?
Just so it could be something as simple as highlighting.
And so I've been doing that in the document right now.
Perfect, yeah.
A lot of what we've been doing is doing track changes. We also, as we're meeting, there are times if I have the document open, I add something as a comment, or in other areas of the document, you'll see a lot of highlighting or slightly different colors. So these were 2 different discussion points we've had where I've gone back and rewritten a section. I changed the color just to let, partially internally, partially for you guys when I send it out, to let us know that there are areas where we've gone back, either done extensive rewrites or made changes, or there have been a couple of times in the meetings where we've gone over a few numbers in some of the sections, and there have been some discussion around what's the right number in there. So a couple of those are highlighted as well. So with the track changes, we've been able to keep tabs on a lot of what we're changing, and that is my hope, is that when we get it out to you, is that it's not entirely a bunch of red lines and scribble marks.
Yeah, that's hard to read.
But that there is enough of a distinction that you'll be able to notice, areas or highlighted areas of things that we've changed.
Doug, in light of the fact that we're recommending potentially a pretty significant reorg of the document as it currently sits, and how it previously sat, I should say, I'm wondering if in the final version, the draft version of the document that we circulate to the committee, we could highlight the areas or sections that were subject to significant conversation, or point those out to you, like you really, or do a little sidebar of a, hey, need your comment, or make sure you see this. If the ones that we really want to make sure that you see or provide your feedback or input on, would that be okay, or what's the preference?
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's okay. I wouldn't find it necessary, but
Okay.
it's okay
Okay.
if anybody else likes it.
I mean, having it highlighted certainly would be valuable. I'm going to just go back through my notes and make sure.
And look
that-
for the things that you were concerned about or had conversations about, okay?
And quite frankly, if I'm unclear, every one of these sessions is recorded, so I'll go back and look at a recording if I'm not sure, because the agendas, except for tonight, Doug, we had a agenda that we knew what section we were going through, and we could refer to that way, so.
Okay.
But I think having it some indication of major rework would be beneficial to know, okay, I might want to scrutinize this with a little bit more detail. To
Sure.
make sure all the thoughts are there.
Okay.
And I kind of took a little cheat sheet of our meeting agenda, so I can even clean that up and then send that out. So if there's specific ones,
That's awesome,
that's
yeah.
what I kind of took today, was a little summary sheet of, we've got all the meetings.
I figured you had a cheat sheet because you kept looking down. I said, nobody, no, I
I
mean.
got it all by
that's-
memory.
He
It's
recalled his 27 meetings with
which day,
specificity.
so I just kind of took, as we've got each meeting in a folder, and we've kind of have at least a little Reader's Digest summary on each folder of kind of what it is. I can add a little more detail to that. And then as we send it out, at least you've got the reference to it. So if you want to go back to a meeting, okay, you can know what was the May 7th meeting of 2019. We talked, about, EMS, then, hopefully that can help focus you in a little bit on that. So hopefully that'll help with the review as well. What didn't we talk about tonight? What do we need to wrap up? Obviously, we got some work to do to start compiling, organizing, moving stuff, pulling it all together, but just want to make sure we capture the best we can.
Quick question. Doug, I don't know if you, it seems like the future land use category was a hot topic. Did we include, I see I have notes, did we include a recommendation for doing a new open space inventory?
That was a discussion point. I'd have to go back and take a look on what we did. I can take a look at that, see if that was a recommendation.
Carrie's already saying she thinks it's a great idea.
It's a great,
Yeah, it is. So it's been.
Sounds like she's heading up that committee. I think she just volunteered. And we,
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah,
I think
so
it's from the
that's-
1980s or something.
well, we had an initial open space plan was from the original 2000s, so 2002, 2006, I think, was maybe the last go-around, because that's when we did purchase of development rights of properties. We bought money. That's when we had went out with a bond. 2012, we started an update, and then from 2012, we rolled into, coming out of the 2010 comp plan, we rolled into mixed use, which then rolled into Shadow Pines, which rolled into Shadow Pines Part 2, which then rolled into mixed use implementation, and then now into comp plan. So
but I think that could be a
somewhere in
really,
there, we lost the update to, but there is documentation. We did start going, we had a committee formed in, was formed in 2012, but in that time frame, we started going back, looking at some of those properties. We've still been doing some implementation of it. The money from the bond has been all spent, but like the Filkins property backing up to Harris Whalen Park was one of the last acquisitions that was still in that original plan that, went forward, but we've spent the bond money is spent. We're still paying it off, but not saying we can't look at, what else is out there in, future preservation areas.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I think updating the open space inventory is valuable, not just for preservation, although that's very dear to my own heart, but for other, but sort of for other things. I mean, as Roland was pointing out, if there is a desire to do one of these big super duper community center, library, senior center, whatever things like Pittsford has or Parenton has or something like that, we, looking at sort of suitable land that can be gotten cheaply, but that's accessible to whatever. I mean, it would be just kind of nice to have a lot of stuff in our back pocket, I think, as a town, and to just be aware of where encroachment looked like it might be most dramatic in our town, or as certain environmental changes might take place. As we learned from when our agricultural partners were in here talking to us, there are greater and greater, climatological impacts on the land around here. So some of the needs and uses of lands may end up shifting. So I unless it costs $1 bajillion and takes all of you guys away from your job for 6 months, I think it would be a wise investment.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great action item.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm good.
So I think good discussions tonight, went through a lot of items that gave us a path forward, so thank you for the direction on that. And as we start to pull the document together, we know we're heading in the right direction, getting that together, and then, as well as the making sure we've got the content in there that we need. So if there's no further discussion tonight, I'll hereby declare the meeting for January 31st closed at 7:21 p.m. Thank you all for coming.